Imagine this. You're sitting inside a plane just moments after takeoff. You look outside, the city is getting smaller, everything feels normal. But then something feels wrong. The plane starts turning sharper than it should. The left engine suddenly sounds like it's screaming. And up front, the captain, the man supposed to save everyone, he is completely silent, not moving. Now, all eyes, all hopes are on the young co pilot sitting beside him. He's alone in a cockpit, fighting a machine that's no longer listening. But what caused this? A small technical fault, tiny, simple, but deadly. And once you see what really happened up there, you'll never look at small problems the same way again. This is the story of Tarom Flight 371, Romania's deadliest air disaster. March 31st, 1995, Bucharest, Romania. It was a quiet Friday morning at Autopilot Airport. For the passengers of Tarom Flight 371, it was just another normal day. A simple flight to Brussels, Belgium. A journey of just under 2 hours. The airline operating this flight, TAROM, Romania's proud national carrier, known for its safety, its legacy, and currently flying to over 50 destinations across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Waiting for the passengers that morning was an Airbus A310, a modern wide-body aircraft only 8 years old, trusted for its comfort and reliability. And in the cockpit sat two of Tarom's best, Captain Liviu Batanoiu, a legend in Romanian aviation circles, over 14,000 flying hours under his belt. By his side, First Officer Ionel Stoy, another highly experienced pilot with more than 8,000 hours in the skies. On board that morning, 49 passengers and 11 crew. At exactly 9:06 a.m., Tarom Flight 371 began its takeoff roll on runway 08 right. The powerful engines roared to life. The plane surged down the runway, gaining speed, before gently lifting into the calm morning sky. But just moments after takeoff, something wasn't right. The aircraft began drifting slightly to the left, subtle but unusual. At first glance, it didn't seem dangerous. No alarms, no warnings, no panic, just a gentle, quiet turn to the left. But inside the cockpit, no one seemed to correct it. Seconds passed, the left turn grew sharper, the engine sound grew louder, and whatever was happening up there, it wasn't normal. What nobody on board knew was that these small signs were about to lead Tarom Flight 371 into one of the deadliest moments in Romania's aviation history. A tragedy that would leave an entire nation searching for answers. A small detail, easy to ignore, but in aviation, small details can change everything. As Tarom Flight 371 lifted into the sky, everything seemed normal. The aircraft climbed steadily, piercing through the morning clouds. But deep inside the cockpit, an invisible problem was already brewing. The plane's auto throttle system, a key component in controlling engine power during flight, suddenly malfunctioned. Instead of maintaining the balance between the two engines, it began increasing power in the left engine while the right engine stayed at a lower setting. The auto throttle system works like an autopilot for the engines, adjusting their speed to maintain the desired altitude and flight path. This ensures that both engines work in harmony. But the system failure wasn't noticeable at first. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. As the left engine power gradually increased, the aircraft started banking to the left. The plane was still flying smoothly, but something was wrong. The subtle drift, the growing imbalance, the auto throttle, instead of balancing the engine power, let the left engine speed up, pushing the plane harder to the left. The imbalance caused by the auto throttle malfunction wasn't catastrophic at first, but over time it got worse. The left engine was working harder than the right, producing more thrust. The imbalance caused a banking turn to the left, which was unnatural for the plane's trajectory. The aircraft wasn't responding like it should. The left engine was producing more power than it needed to, pushing the aircraft in a direction it wasn't meant to go. The plane was turning more sharply than it should have. But it wasn't just that. The loud roar of the left engine grew louder, creating a disturbing noise inside the cockpit. And yet, despite this oddity, no immediate correction was made. Inside the cockpit, Captain Liviu Batanoiu, a man with over 14,000 hours of flying experience, should have been the one to make the corrections. But instead of taking control of the situation, the captain went silent. He was unresponsive. The first officer, Ionel Stoy, noticed this but wasn't sure what was happening. What neither of them realized at that moment was that Captain Bartanoyu was having a severe medical emergency. Some speculated it was a heart attack, a sudden fatal medical event that can occur without warning, especially under stress. Others believed it could have been a blackout, where the captain lost consciousness from a lack of oxygen or another medical issue. In the cockpit, the situation rapidly deteriorated. The aircraft's left engine was pushing harder, and the captain, the only person qualified to correct it, was unable to do anything. With each passing second, the aircraft's left engine kept increasing in power. The leftward bank became more pronounced. But the captain, the heart of the plane's safety and control, was unresponsive. The first officer, Stoy, was now alone, managing a malfunctioning plane and a medical crisis in the cockpit. The engine screamed louder, and the aircraft tilted more aggressively to the left. Meanwhile, the passengers in the cabin were completely unaware of the terrifying struggle unfolding up front. But every second that passed brought them closer to an unimaginable disaster. As the aircraft banked further to the left, the situation inside the cockpit grew more dire by the second. First Officer Ionel Stoy was now fully aware that something was terribly wrong. The plane was no longer responding like it should. It was clear that the auto throttle malfunction had pushed the left engine into overdrive, but the reality was even worse than he imagined. Stoy, trying to regain control, reached for the autopilot settings. He attempted to correct the aircraft's sharp turn to the left, but something strange began to happen. The autopilot was fighting him. Every time Stoy tried to disengage or correct the aircraft's path, the autopilot would automatically try to maintain the plane's current course. This wasn't just a simple autopilot malfunction, it was actively resisting him, locking the plane into a position that would make any correction nearly impossible. The left engine, now at full thrust, was pushing the plane further to the left, relentlessly. Meanwhile, the right engine remained idle, barely contributing to the plane's overall thrust. This imbalance between the engines was becoming more dangerous with each passing second. The aircraft was fighting against itself, with one engine pushing it in one direction, while the other engine was barely providing any support to stabilize the flight. As the seconds ticked by, the leftward bank grew sharper. The plane was now rolling dangerously to the left, and the control surfaces weren't enough to counter the imbalance. The more the autopilot fought the first officer's attempts to regain control, the harder it became to stabilize the aircraft. The altitude began dropping rapidly. Stoy's hands were shaking as he fought with everything he had, but it was as though the plane had turned against him. The engines, the autopilot, and even his own instincts seemed to be working against him. The plane was now descending at a frightening speed. The altitude was plummeting with each passing second. The cockpit alarm blared, but it was too late for simple warnings. The sharp left turn and rapid descent were creating extreme forces on the passengers and crew. The nose of the plane seemed to be pulling lower and lower, heading straight toward the ground. The passengers had no idea. They were still in their seats, unaware of the chaos unfolding in the cockpit just a few meters away from them. Inside, Stoy's face was pale with desperation as he fought desperately to wrestle control back from the autopilot and the engines. But time was running out. Stoy knew that if the aircraft kept descending at this rate, they would be out of time, out of altitude. He tried once more to switch the autopilot off, pulling back on the controls with all his might. But the autopilot resisted again, locking him out of any meaningful correction. It was a fight Stoy couldn't win. With the situation worsening by the second, the first officer knew that the possibility of a safe landing was slipping further away. What happened next would change everything. The Airbus was no longer flying. It was falling, spinning, turning, completely out of control. Inside the cockpit, First Officer Ionel Stoy was doing everything he could, but the plane was fighting back harder. The left engine stuck at full power, the right engine barely producing any thrust. This imbalance was deadly. Slowly, the plane began leaning to its left side. 10 degrees, 30 degrees, 50 degrees. And then, the unthinkable, the aircraft rolled almost completely on its side, reaching a 90-degree bank, its left wing pointing straight down. It wasn't flying anymore, it was diving. The nose of the aircraft dropped sharply, and the ground started coming up fast. 100 knots, 150 knots, 200 knots. There was nothing left to stop it. 250 knots, 280 knots, 300 knots. And in those final moments, one last transmission from First Officer Stoy came over the radio. A calm but chilling voice. Left engine failed. That was the last anyone ever heard from Tarom Flight 371. Seconds later, at 9:08:34 a.m., with a speed of 324 knots, the plane slammed into an open field near the village of Palotesti. There were no survivors. Romania had just witnessed its deadliest air disaster. When investigators reached the crash site of Tarom Flight 371, the wreckage alone didn't tell them the full story. To understand what really happened, they had to go inside the data, inside the cockpit, and what they discovered was shocking. It all began with the aircraft's auto throttle system, a feature designed to control engine power automatically. But hidden deep inside the system was a tiny malfunction, a faulty electrical component. This fault affected only the left engine. During takeoff, both engines were supposed to produce equal power. But suddenly, the left engine began producing more power without anyone commanding it. This was why the aircraft started to turn left moments after takeoff. Not because of wind, not because of pilot error, but because the left engine was literally pushing harder than the right. Normally, this situation was recoverable, but then came the second tragedy. Captain Liviu Batanoiu, the man flying the plane, suddenly went silent. Investigators found he suffered a massive heart attack or possible blackout just 27 seconds after takeoff. His hands likely fell onto the controls, unknowingly blocking the co-pilot's efforts to save the plane. The worst possible timing during the worst possible malfunction. You might wonder, wasn't there a backup? The truth is, the auto throttle fault wasn't a rare thing. It was known. But Airbus systems at the time didn't have automatic cutoffs for this specific failure. Worse, the plane's autopilot was helping the wrong engine, adding even more imbalance. Everything combined into a perfect storm. Tiny electrical fault, captain incapacitated, autopilot working against recovery, and a young co-pilot left to fight alone. In seconds he didn't have. Sadly, yes. If the auto throttle system had better fault detection, if the captain's health condition had been monitored more closely, if Airbus systems were updated sooner. But all those ifs came too late. For the 60 lives lost on Tarom Flight 371. In the end, it wasn't a storm, it wasn't a terrorist, it wasn't even a dramatic mid-air explosion. It was a tiny technical fault buried deep inside a machine built to conquer the skies, combined with a single moment of human vulnerability, and within just 89 seconds, an entire flight was lost. And maybe that's the most terrifying truth about flying. It's rarely the loud disasters we fear, it's the quiet ones, the ones built in slowly, silently, until it's too late. This was the story of Tarom Flight 371, a plane defeated not by power, not by weather, not by enemies, but by silence,